Gale and Andrew, welcome.
Thanks for having me on
Hello.
the show. What's going on?
Just getting ready for the end of the year. Excited for all that's coming next year. We're gonna get right to what I want to hear from you, Andrew. I've seen your reel. You're on Twitter trying to get Elon to give you this handle that's available for your new company. Tell me about how the effort is going. Are you gonna get the handle you need on Twitter? Tell me more.
Yeah, so that is part of like a marketing strategy, and it's just really fun.
Love it.
It's it's really if we get it or don't get it, it doesn't really matter. It's a damn Twitter handle. But I'm just the type of person where, if there's kind of like something I want to go after, I have fun with it. And I went to the Twitter HQ, which is like close to my house, with the no sign. And the hardest part of that was this just making the damn sign, because you got to like Sharpie it in. But the honest truth behind it is, since we are rebranding from micro acquire to acquire, I told my team, we really need to have people begin rooting for acquire, not micro acquire. And so this has been a fun way for people to kind of, we've seen a lot of people, to my surprise, like root for us, like, yeah, Twitter, give it to them. And so that's, really encouraging and fun. But, the marketing sort of thought process behind it was, we have so much brand affinity with micro acquire. We wanted to kind of carry that conversation over to our new brand before it goes live, which is going to be first week of January. So when this comes out, we might already fully be acquire.com. But it's just fun. Is kind of the short stint of it.
I'm here for it. Here for it. With as much as you both are on Twitter, what do you think of the Elon takeover in the last number of months? Gale, go for it.
I mean, to be honest, I don't really care that much. I haven't noticed that big of a difference from VC startup Twitter. I do think it's light, but I also feel like just because of the pandemic and what's happened in the last 2 years, everybody is tired of everything right now. So there's just kind of a lag in terms of engagement. But yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate some of the stuff that I'm seeing in terms of how he's treated the team, and I don't necessarily agree with everything that he's doing from a speech and censorship and safety perspective, but I think it's all going to be fine at the end of the day, and it'll regulate itself and level out. And I don't foresee any kind of doomsday coming for Twitter.
Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, the only knock I'd give on Elon is he hasn't free acquired. Or just kidding. The handle. Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I try to just stay in my lane and not get distracted. And there's just been so much news that isn't relevant to what I'm
Yeah.
trying to accomplish day to day. So, you know, I can have opinions on how he runs a company or how he should do this or shouldn't do that, but I kind of stay away from that. I'm not a person that says, hey, that's, completely incorrect, Elon. It's a Twitter. He owns it. It's his business. So
Isn't
I've
it?
been very sort of tunnel vision in terms of just, it's distracting. I'll say that.
Yeah, of
And I
course.
agree with Gale in terms of, if there are things I don't agree with, it's just, it's caused a lot of thrash. And I think probably I empathize for the team at Twitter in terms of just having a leader do that to you almost on a daily basis, where it's kind of, on a Saturday, the whole, company is just hearing about different changes. I think that's just a very distracting work environment. So, but yeah, I think a lot of it's just noise.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot air, right? It seems like from a lot of people probably take some things too far. I agree on the team side of things as well, but then also to your point, Andrew, like are, how are all these people running their businesses still and spending so much time following this and looking? I don't understand some of that. It's crazy. People are like, oh, freaking out about everything. Like, I'm never going to use the platform again. Okay, that's your decision if it's like the ownership, and I get that. But also, some people are, they say that and they're on it the next day and the next day and the next day. And like, you don't have to use it. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, one thing I will say is startup founders and VCs will never leave. we'll we'll never
That's what
leave
I'm saying.
Twitter. We ain't
We're
going anywhere.
addicted.
I do have a very scientific pull up right now asking people this very question in startup and VC Twitter. And about two-thirds are saying they're definitely staying, and only 8% say they leave, which matches the data I read, which is expecting about 10% of people to leave in the next 2 years. But I don't even think that's that big of a deal. I mean, it's 330 million Twitter folks worldwide, and you're losing like 30 of them. I just don't see what the big deal is. I think Elon's going to find new ways to monetize this, and I think it should be a fairly healthy business because, like, from my perspective, this is the best UI. Like the rest of the UIs just suck from a social media perspective, and that's the thing that I care about the most is how can I get good content in a way that makes sense and is logical and share that out and get great engagement. I think Twitter's done a fabulous job with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would just add, I guess to add to what I was saying earlier, the one thing I would probably put myself as is just an optimist. Like I'm hoping for the best. I'm hoping things work
Yeah.
out. Right now there's a lot to talk about and probably debate on, things that happen that shouldn't have happened. But I hope in the end it all works out. So I'm optimistic on that end.
Yeah.
I have one more question about Twitter for you, Andrew. So I'm a big fan. You have very short tweets. They're always positive. What's your strategy? How do you come up with these?
That's a good question. So if you look at most of my tweets, you'll see I just write them from my iPhone. So it's usually, I think when people try to create like a personal brand or they try to, um, you know, think really hard about like what is a really good tweet, it just kind of you get like writer's block or whatever maybe, and it's also not fun. Like that's not fun to me. That sounds like a job. I don't want to do that. So most of my tweets are kind of, and I appreciate the compliment. Thank you. But I do have some awful tweets as
You're
well.
welcome.
But they're usually I wake up in the morning and I used to journal a lot, so I'd wake up in the morning and journal, not a weird journal like Dear Diary, just kind
Wait,
of
why is it a weird journal?
like it's
Here
just
I
a
am.
journal where I track, what's going well in the business, goals I have for the day, things that, and I still do this. So I've always been kind of an avid sort of writer. And I just like, inspiring other founders. And I just think, and that's kind of like my why, if you will, is just motivating other founders, inspiring other founders. And I know that sounds super, super cheesy, but I really do get um like I really my favorite tweets are the ones where I get a response like I needed to hear that or something like that, because startups are so goddamn hard, and sometimes just that extra sort of like, hey, it's kind of hard for everybody, but like keep going. That's probably like a tweet I would write,
like
um
10,000 versions of that, basically.
Put that out there right now, and you'll have a few thousand by the end of the episode.
yeah,
Exactly.
it just I try to just keep it light, and sometimes I'll share some more tactical stuff, but none of it's really planned. It's really just sometimes it's just what I'm doing that day or what I'm thinking that day. So
Yeah.
Wait, Andrew, you're telling me that you're not having ChatGPT write all your tweets right now?
no, so we can put this on the podcast. Drake ghostwrites all of my tweets. So that's
I
where
knew it. I knew it. I
that's where
always thought straight from
yeah.
the six.
Yep. So that's what, it's not me. It's not me. No.
What's
I've been
isn't there like
I have just sorry to interrupt. I have been
no, it's okay.
accused of being a bot like 100 times. Like, and I just all right. That's a compliment. I
I got some of
guess.
that too. Someone replied like, "I thought Elon got rid of all the bots." Like some of my tweets, I was like, "Bro, what? Are you kidding me?" Like, whatever. Like, okay, moving on. Like, spend your
That's called
time
a
better.
troll, Justin. They're everywhere.
I know. I just ignore them or block them or mute
Block,
them.
block,
Yeah.
move on.
There's a really good quote around that too. Just like as your social media presence gets bigger, that I always like to just think about is, I might botch this quote, but it's he or she who takes offense to something that has no meaning for offense is a fool, and then someone who takes offense for something that is meaning to be offensive is a greater fool. So what that basically means is when someone's trying to they say something mean or rude or something like that, and you let it get to you, you're really just kind of feeding into the troll, letting them win. There's another quote around like, some like pigs like to play in the mud, and if you join with them, you might get muddy too. So
Yeah.
sometimes people are like, "Hey, your tweets suck," like, or I vehemently disagree with you, and I still like. I'm like, I
We're,
respect your
we're gonna
opinion.
look up that actual pig quote for people later, but I know the quote you're talking about. I like that one too, though. Like, you can't tell if everyone's playing the mud or whatever. Like they all
It,
get
it
dirty.
the quote is, if you wrestle with a pig, you might get muddy or something like that. Look it up. It basically
I'm
just
looking it
means
up.
don't engage in
Don't get
stuff. Just
involved.
yeah, if someone disagrees with you, just respect their opinion, move on with your life.
It may be a Mark Twain quote if this is a different one. Never wrestle with a pig; it gets mud all over you, and the pig likes it. It's one of the quotes. There's another one, I'm sure,
Yeah, that's
around
the
there.
one. That's the one I was referring to.
I agree though, and especially on Twitter, right, where it is like the water cooler of the internet, where everyone is there discussing every main topic, whatever, in any case, and like it's an endless like black hole if you want it to be in terms of going on and on. And one thing though with that on the Twitter thing is I mentioned the ChatGPT thing. Here's what both of you think about AI. If you play with ChatGPT at all, any applications, things you're excited about, interested in, I want to get your takes. Gail, maybe you start first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for, I'll answer from my seat as a VC. I've talked to some
Sure.
of my founders about it. It Generative content is coming and it's here and it's going to continue to get even more high quality, and that's going to happen faster and faster. So how are my companies in the portfolio thinking about it? um, I I think that it's that the tool today surfaces, something that's a really great start from a content perspective. But like I have thought for a long time, we already have way too much content out there, and so there's still a huge problem. Like, how do you make that content really unique, differentiated, helpful for the audience that you're intending it to be? And I think that piece is missing right now, but in the future, it might not be. So it's something to definitely watch. One of the things that I find nuts about ChatGPT is that, it costs so much to run it. I mean, it still
Yeah.
requires a ton of power, and like, how are they going to monetize that in the future? So that is something that's interesting to think through.
Yeah, I read
Andrew?
I think it's 3 million a day to run it a day. So that's $1 billion a year if I'm doing my math right.
Yeah,
Um
and it's Microsoft that's funding most of this, right?
I'm not sure, but that's a lot of money per year.
Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
It's
Microsoft is taking the stance that they are investing in this to try to make a cloud play. So
mm,
same reason that they bought the gaming company earlier this year. Like, they're really trying to figure out how can they beat Amazon and Google, and they're making bets in these areas. So I mean, it's interesting that Microsoft is behind a lot of this.
I didn't know that.
I
I
had no
guess
idea.
I'll give my take from just a marketer founder position. I think the tool's fantastic. I mean, I've tried it and I'm like, whoa, like, and I think those moments in just product development are just so exciting. And I think it came at a refreshing time too, just kind of with how this last year's played out for just tech in general. So that when I think of these sort of shifts, I think of when the iPhone came out, when blockchain was emerging as with different use cases, real paradigm shifts in business like internet, mobile, blockchain. Maybe AI is kind of like that next frontier, if you will. But I always believe, the best form of marketing, and this is obviously biased because this is kind of the marketing I like to do, is more creative marketing that doesn't feel necessarily like marketing, and kind of has an element of humor, personality to it. But there's obviously a ton of great ways that I can see, you know, ChatGPT being implemented for, a full SEO blitz strategy or something like that. But then I think on the other side, what if Google kind of figures out an article that's generated on ChatGPT and then just starts, and I think that is very likely. I mean,
Yeah.
why wouldn't they? You're just generating thousands of articles.
Especially
Um,
if it's a Microsoft thing. They will
yeah,
figure it out.
that's a good point too. See,
For sure.
so I think it's inning one. It's like, we got I put in some funny stuff in there, some hard questions, and I was surprised. So we don't have any use cases for it yet at Acquire, but I'm sure we will in the near future. It's cool. It's interesting.
If it is from a content perspective and that like the SEO keyword rich whatever articles and like to pump out content, yeah, I can see the value of it. But to your point, if it gets kind of unranked or deranked in Google, you're screwed. And Google won't do it. I talked to actually my friend at Google this week, and he was like, "Yeah, reputational risk wise, it's not worth it for Google, at least right now, in terms of that, to do anything like this in this capacity, at least, where ChatGPT can do it in terms of open AI running it." But to your point, it's like first inning, as you mentioned, Andrew. It's just the beginning. Like this is so early in all of this stuff. Like we'll see how this kind of progresses and what happens from it. Has to
Think
be curious.
just
Go ahead.
just to kind of maybe sorry if I'm totally twisting this, but
No, this is perfect.
the deep fakes are the ones that freak me out. Like I put up a video today and someone DM me is like, is this real or is this like a deep fake? And it's a real video.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's gonna be, I saw a video, it was like Morgan Freeman and this
Yes.
guy standing together, and it was shockingly, like if I saw the video, I wouldn't know that's not Morgan Freeman. And so I think that'll be a little interesting. Like, how does that play out? I also think it
That's
could be
scary.
cool. Maybe get Morgan Freeman like announcing all your product updates and stuff like that. I wouldn't mind that. Narrating your book, but that, I think that's also another interesting, piece of technology that's kind of taking us all by storm,
Yeah, the
and
deepfake side of it.
and dangerous too.
Yeah, they had like the president. I think that when Obama was president, they had some video on viral with like him. And it's like that's not actually him. It's like deep fake, and it's just like, oh, people get so pissed about anything in politics, and if you have a deep fake in it, then just inciting that anger in politics even more, which is not needed. So, kind of scary in that way.
One last comment I'll make about, from just my perspective on Chat GPT and how it's kind of affected, my day to day, is I think a lot of people, especially like on Twitter, LinkedIn, wherever you're creating content, people kind of have this sort of like, is this real? Is it not real? And that's going to be an interesting sort of, I guess, mental filter when, and then how will you, like, is, if you create content with Chat GPT, is that bad? Like, or is that good? And depending on which context, obviously a blog post is fine. But if you're, messaging out, I don't know, sales emails, or, writing Twitter threads or something like that, or a book with Chat GPT, and it's, you really, basically what I'm trying to say is, the creation of content and you didn't really make the content, and then people have to kind of discern whether you made it or not. I think that'll be kind of interesting as it gets more advanced and you just can't tell the difference anymore.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, I
want
think the
go ahead, Gail.
personal spin is really important. And that's why like the authentic content, the differentiated, the stuff that today you can't fabricate using a tool like that, I think is still what attracts people. It connects with people in a way that the AI stuff can't yet. When, to your point, when we can't discern that, we're going to need AI to discern it for us, and start to get into all these like crazy, philosophical questions in terms of like, where does this end? And I think, for me as a future of work investor, like I think about that a lot. Like, where do we draw the line of AI really helping us as humans do our jobs versus getting to the point where it starts to actually become a problem for us?
Where do you think the opportunities are with AI, both in like Gail in your work as a VC, Andrew running micro, soon to be acquire. Where do you? Where do you think there's opportunities even to like to help you in your day to day in terms of AI stuff?
I'll answer first from a future work perspective. There's still a ton of menial stuff that we're all doing. AI within the next couple of years is going to make it so that we don't have to do that. Let me give you an example. I do not know why today there is not a solution for me to automatically connect people in my network. So I'm talking about something that goes to my LinkedIn or whatever database I connect it to and says, okay, Gail wants to connect one of her portfolio company founders with CTOs in this industry, with this educational background, whatever the query is, automatically find them, rank order them, create individualized emails to each of them. I can quickly review them and it sends them off. But there's still a lot of the pre-work that I have to put into that process. And yes, there are some tools that do a little bit of it. But moving forward, I think there's going to be much more comprehensive AI solutions that completely replace things that we do and we have to do today, but they're not really value add.
Andrew, what do you
Yeah.
think?
I think there's going to be a ton of interesting use cases, especially for just startups in general. Like one example would be any startup right now that's running like an SDR AE program, just take your email sequences and plug it into Chat GPT and you'll probably get better, written emails out of that. That's one easy win. We've actually done that. And like, ones that we use. And I'm like, that's better.
That's
So
good.
yeah, stuff like that, and then I think just, in terms of content, I think there's a use for it if you're writing on, maybe a very, uh, broad topic or even specific topic, but still, being able to add in that extra, 20-30% to make it unique, make it authentic to your brand's voice. That's kind of the use cases that come immediately to mind for me. But I candidly haven't dove too much in farther than that.
Do you think it applies, Andrew, to you in terms of acquisitions, people selling businesses, anything on that process that helps in terms of using AI to apply to what you kind of inherently help people with acquire?
That's a good question. I would say more on this. We're looking more on the side of machine learning, like in terms of like valuation models, just connecting a startup with a buyer based on their specific acquisition mandates. But in terms of how we would plug in AI into microacquire, I maybe like cleaning up like the listings or the sims that we create. I could see a big opportunity there. um sim, if for listeners that aren't familiar, it's just a fancy acronym for like a reverse pitch deck when you're selling your company confidential information memorandum. So that could be an opportunity. I just thought of that now. I didn't I hadn't previously thought of that. But that could actually help because, when founders come on to acquire, they write their life story and just kind of breaking that down into something more concise. That could be a fantastic use case.
One thing I'm curious about with kind of having both of you here, obviously with acquire, lots of people at different levels getting acquired all the time. In the VC world, companies also get acquired as well. I want to start you, Andrew, with this one. Top acquisitions of last year. There are some big ones. We had like Adobe acquiring Figma. What do you think about the biggest potential in terms of an acquisition that could happen on your platform to start with? I'm curious, Andrew.
Maybe Twitter. Yeah. No, I'm
Come on
kidding.
over to acquire.
The biggest, so we can handle transactions in the hundreds of millions if the value is there. Because we work with just, some of the largest private equity firms in the world. We aren't touching like the Vistas and stuff like that or anything like that who are going to pull down a public company and take it private. But I think that's a tough question. I don't want to put a name out there because then I'm like, you're getting acquired, But
Exactly.
I guess, if I had to say, a company that I'd love to see acquire another company, I think there's a lot of opportunity for just general consolidation. I think we're going to see a lot of that just naturally. and it likely won't take place on microacquire. But let me see if I can get a good answer to this. Like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for possibly some of the no code platforms to acquire like a media company. We've seen that with, Zapier acquiring MakerPad. We saw Stripe acquiring Indie Hackers. We saw HubSpot acquire The Hustle. I can see that happening a lot more. And we work with, also public companies like that. So I'd say that's probably some of the acquisitions that I'm excited about to see on Microacquire. And if we finally get one, like a big name and a big sort of media company, that would be awesome to see. So that's probably my 2023 bet of the coolest acquisition.
On the note of acquisitions for you, Gale, what have you noticed in terms of price or things you've seen of companies getting acquired, or are they going to get acquired because the market's been crazy in 2022 in terms of even valuations, which then affects a lot of stuff? Just what are you seeing in terms of acquisitions or anything on your side, Gale?
Since, Q2 of this year, we've seen a slowdown in terms of exit interest. And I think that's just because of inherent fear in the market and what happens when you've got a macro environment like we just went through, we're still sitting in. Everybody takes a step back and takes a breath and waits until they feel like it's time to kind of come out and re-engage. I think for the beginning of 2023, potentially all of 2023, we're going to have an exit environment where companies are they're not commanding the valuations that they did historically. I think for example, on the software side, the multiples are going to come back down to a 6 to 8x most of the time, and that's a revenue multiple upon acquisition that had gotten as high as 25, 100x. I mean, it was nuts in terms of what was happening recently. But then we saw when these companies would get acquired, the value is not holding when companies are IPOing. The value is not holding, and so I think it's a really good thing that the valuation multiples from a revenue perspective are coming way down to earth, because ultimately it's going to create an environment for all of us along the VC stack and into the acquisition stack to make sure that these companies are getting valued appropriately.
I don't know if you add something, Andrew. I'm curious with the acquisitions as well. So obviously we have that with the markets. We're hoping the markets next year are better, which may change some things as well and accelerate maybe some more acquisitions. But tying into that, with what we've seen with kind of the Great Resignation of sorts, and then also combined with that these big tech layoffs, I guess I'm curious for you, Andrew. Have you seen or notice more companies on the platform? Is there any tie into that in terms of people deciding to actually start their own businesses or anything on that? As you've seen, it's been for this whole year really have these huge layoffs and talent that are engineers and everything else that can create things. Have you seen anything that affecting you at all in terms of your business, Andrew?
Yeah, good question. And to Gail's point, I agree in terms of just when everyone's kind of like on the same page in terms of expectations. So on the acquisition side, from what I've seen, which again is on the lower end, so we're talking acquisitions, sub 20 million. In 2021, like the gap between seller expectations and buyer expectations was so wild. It was very interesting to see what deals got done and what deals were like, that is extremely overpriced, because um, private equity really didn't budge too much. They weren't really they were more on the sidelines in 20 and 21. And this year they've been more active because founders are starting to realize like this is where your valuation is and this is buyer expectations. And so that's been very beneficial to our business. And then in terms of, what I'm seeing is, for venture businesses, there's obviously been a huge reset in multiples for like it. Yes, your business is not worth 100 million if you're making a million in revenue. And it never was. That was just, a fun year for you. And, now you got to work through it. But on microacquire, we service the lower end of the market where these companies may not have raised venture capital, so they're at like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 million in revenue, and we actually haven't seen a decline in multiples almost at all. So at the bottom end of the market, where they haven't raised capital, the acquisitions that we've seen close are still closing at, I think like the average SaaS acquisition over $1 million in revenue is between like 4 and 7x on MicroAcquire. And that was what we saw previously in the years prior with some outliers. So it's been nice to, have conversations with founders that are much easier now, that aren't just, again, hey, like we can't list your startup for 100x revenue. It's not going to sell for that. So it's definitely made our lives easier. And I think for both buyers and sellers, just again, closing that sort of expectation gap. But, we'll see where that goes next year, because risks on MicroAcquire is, if all buyers sort of just hands up, we're gonna sit this year out, that would be bad for Acquire, because no acquisitions would get done. So we'll just have to wait and see. But we actually saw some tailwinds this year, and I expect those to head into next year. But
Yeah, I think they're going to lean into wanting to acquire more, at least from the VC back stuff that I see. It's just a question of, will the founder and their boards take the deal?
yeah, one interesting thing I've seen too, which is kind of, I don't understand, is where if there's I've seen this on a few occasions where there's offers on the table, and they'll push the company into bankruptcy rather than some sort of like deal where obviously they aren't going to get all their capital back, but it's a situation where it's just easier to push the company into bankruptcy, which makes no sense to me. It's happened a few times based on just referrals from other people that use MicroAcquire, but that has been fascinating in terms of you have like literally a bunch of willing buyers, but just bankrupting the company is the easier path, and that's kind of a bummer because they have good customers, good product, good IP. Um, but I think that's just a casualty
Andrew,
of
do you think that's because there's not time? So sometimes I have founders that give me a few months and I'm like, I can't even help you because an exit process takes a while. Or is it literally because the VCs that you're seeing do this, they just don't need the money, because their construction strategy and their portfolio is such that they're looking for a couple unicorns and that's it.
I don't know. I'm not a VC, so I can't speak to fund structures as well as you can. But I mean, I could maybe just guess, just maybe just putting into bankruptcy is probably easier for both the founders and the investors. That's the only guess I really have.
I can't imagine if a founder has a buyer on the table, though. I've seen founders want to make the sale because then they can say that they sold a company.
I agree. That's why I think it's so interesting. And it's happened on only 3 occasions, so it's not a huge trend where I'm seeing
Okay.
hundreds or thousands of companies doing this. So they may be unique situations where maybe I don't have details, but there's one name in particular I won't disclose, but it was a situation where we were able to find a buyer. They had, I believe, 2 letter of intents that were strong. The founders were clearly going to walk away with capital post acquisition, but the decision, to my knowledge, was based on going into bankruptcy was the better route for the company, with
Hmm.
a little bit of extra context. So
Andrew, you
I
can
don't
just
know.
say it's FTX. It's fine. You don't have to be quiet about it. You don't have
Well,
to. We,
No,
we
you
all we
got
all
me.
know.
You
We all
got me.
know
You
what's
got
going
me.
on here.
No one wanted that. Someone actually did try to list FTX on
No,
MicroAcquire, and
stop.
we were like, "Can you prove ownership?" And then it ended there.
Can he prove ownership? Who can prove ownership? I mean, that's a lot.
That's good. Maybe it was him, and he couldn't prove ownership.
You get SPF just on micro acquire checking out. I wonder if I could sell this bad boy on here. Who knows?
all right, Justin. What's your summary on FTX?
Uh, I mean, I know he's going back to the U.S. today in terms of SBF. But I mean, everyone's wondering about the diligence process side of it in terms of the founders and what Sequoia was going through. I think a lot of things when I see that, I'm just like, man, the power of storytelling is crazy. Like to be able to just leverage that like no other, and then creating this mythical thing around FTX. I don't know. It just that seems to me. I talked to a lot of early stage founders that just like need to improve their storytelling and their narrative and everything around their company, and just seeing when it is actually like this, or even like Adam Newman and his whole aura around his big tall guy, the different funny guy, and is just like can sell like no other. It's like it's such a powerful skill, but do you get caught up in that as a VC? Obviously, they did in this particular case, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, for me, so I prior to acquire, I built a crypto protocol company that was acquired by a company called Bank of the Future. And so I was part of like the big run up and the big down. And so when it started happening again, I was like, huh, this looks very similar. I'm going to sit this one out. And so it's really unfortunate just to see just, customers, losing, because it's really the retail customers that get hurt the hardest. And just, man, the documentary or movie that's going to come out after that,
Who
like
gets it? HBO, Hulu?
I need like a big short version that kind of
Yeah,
breaks down the whole situation like they did the financial
when they
crisis
explain
and
it. Yeah.
just very simple terms, like, because I've tried to dive into it, but then again, I stay in my lane so I don't get too distracted, but it just gets odder and odder and odder and odder. And then I empathize again with the customers who lost money, and the investors who were duped. And it really is kind of an eye-opening thing of these personas that people can put on. And you know it's kind of, again, like a real deep fake, if you will, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I have lots of thoughts on this, but I implore the SEC to really think about, how did this happen to the retail investors, which, I sadly have a confession to make that I got caught up in the Voyager explosion, well before the FTX happened, so I was not surprised at all when this occurred. And so I lost some money, but I was reading other Voyager customers, saying that their savings for a house just was evaporated because they listened to Mark Cuban endorse this product. And it's like, how in the world did we allow this to happen? And at the same time, the SEC has such strict regulations around what people can do from an angel investment perspective that it's bonkers. So I think we really need to understand, like, how can we help retail investors make better decisions, but give them opportunities to test out things like angel investing or crypto if they want to, but there should be some safeguards there. And moving forward, last thing I'll say on FTX, like, there will be a process of justice happen with our dear FTX leader. And I really hope he gets at least 11 years, per what Elizabeth Holmes got this year, because she was sentenced based on what she did to professional investors. And once again, this guy just robbed thousands and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of retail investors. So I hope that we set an example here, because it has to stop.
Yeah, I would agree with that, just from personal experience. And I think there's I think the worst thing to kind of do in this situation is kind of finger point and blame, because like there was celebrity endorsements, like
Yeah.
my dear friend Tom Brady. He was caught up. Mark Cuban was caught up. um there's just so many people involved. The SEC's lack of regulation, I think, this is, I always think, when really really bad stuff happens, there's an opportunity to really come out of it on a better side. And that includes VC due diligence, celebrity endorsements. Like, this could be a wake-up call for them as well, in terms of the products that you promote. Like, you should really do due diligence on them in terms of the validity of it. But just, I think this is kind of one of the big explosions of when you know, and again, I don't think this is any one person's fault. But if everyone's able to collectively come together and improve upon just who you're endorsing, SEC in terms of new regulations that protect retail investors. Obviously, VCs have definitely rose the bar on due diligence, which is fantastic. So I think it's just a giant learning lesson, a painful one, but sometimes it's necessary for everybody to kind of have this big wake up call. um, because I saw it in 2018 when we had all these ICOs, and it's like, did we forget about that? Like, people were just minting stuff out of nowhere, raising $50 million, and then it's gone, and that all was retail investors, trillions of dollars gone again. And so this was just like the second part of the movie, and so I'm hopeful that there is some sort of in terms of the cryptocurrency industry or crypto, whatever you want to call it, blockchain, some real like safeguards. What's a security token? What's a utility token? How do you operate? Like, the reason that these exchanges operate in the Bahamas, or you have Binance in wherever, is because you cannot operate in the United States. And so when you don't have proper regulation, and I may be completely speaking um, without full context, but without that clear regulation, it just opens up competitors to kind of skid legal laws, if you will. And that's where you have Coinbase kind of at a disadvantage, where they can't, like, they're trying to operate legally, but they were literally. I remember when Binance came out. Binance came out, and I believe they were in the Maldives or something like that. I don't know, just like some island. They bought the government, for what it looked like. And Coinbase is in the United States, and they're just like, they're the number one trading volume exchange in the world now, because they don't have to apply KYC, AML laws, any of that. So I think, I'm hopeful there's an overhaul, because at the end of the day, the most important people to protect, in my opinion, is the retail investors. And um, yeah, but yeah, what an explosion.
And I don't think the trend of retail investors being interested in this stuff is going away. I mean, I think Robinhood especially created access, and it's something that we have to figure out really quickly. We see that on the angel side. We know there's a ton of interest in terms of non-accredited investors and new accredited investors getting started in the space, and how do we make that easier and safer.
One more thing before we leave here. I know we're almost out of time. One trend you're excited about, and Andrew, feel free to add a point to that if you want as well. But some you're excited about for 2023.
Gale, you want to go first?
Well, I will answer this based on the future of work side. So there's lots of stuff happening right now. The tech layoffs. I think unfortunately there's more layoffs coming in January after the holidays, based on what I'm hearing from others. And we're in an environment coming off of the pandemic. We're still in it, but the newness of it, where folks have kind of reset what they want out of their life. A lot of people have moved into second and third tier cities. Their cost of living has gone down. With the shakeup that we're seeing from a layoff perspective, I think that 2023 is going to be a really interesting year from a freelance perspective. So there's been a ton of growth in the freelance economy, the number of freelancers that we see in the US and abroad. I think that's going to continue to grow. In 2022, we invested in an infrastructure company in this space called WorkMate, and they have a really cool solution for freelancers. I would double and triple down that that's going to become even more important. I think corporations are going to be more willing and more interested in hiring freelancers, and it gives people a flexibility to still make a little bit of money and be okay that they were laid off.
Yeah,
Andrew?
that was probably one of the
Did
trends
I
I
take
was.
yours, Andrew?
Should have
Yeah,
gone first. You had the
kind.
opportunity.
I know. I think
It's a risky take.
I guess I'll have two trends. One related towards just startups in general, and then just I just think next year and I think we've seen this kind of emerge, and the trend is just going to continue. But just there's so many opportunities for people. If you hate your job, it's like you have so many different opportunities now to make money online, where maybe you aren't going to be, a billionaire, build a unicorn, or and that's probably not what you want to do. But the amount of options you have, whether that's certain podcasts or, some sort of side hustle, I think that trend is, really, really interesting because it's liberating for a lot of people. And then I think in terms of startups, I think, just fiscal responsibility, I think it's not really a trend, but I guess
The
more
necessity.
more of a
Yes.
requirement. But I think, uh, a little deeper than that is, I think we're going to see kind of, um, it was easy to raise money, but it's not, it's still just as hard to build a business, build a team, build a culture. And as we kind of enter, maybe quote unquote, like, you have peacetime and you have wartime, we're going to see, who gives up during the hard times and who keeps going. And I think the companies that are able to push through these harder times are going to come out and possibly be some of the, most iconic companies that we see in the next decade. So again, I'm optimistic, but I think 2023 is going to be where we really see maybe even, more startups just completely collapse, but then we also see, the best of the best kind of rise to the top. So I'm excited for that.
I'm gonna say my last thing, just community. I think people are still searching for that, whether it be in person, whether it be online, community in some way, shape, or form. I've noticed that on Twitter, I see things about it all the time. I see people looking for other communities to be a part of. I see people building communities. I just think that there's more of that, especially as we came out of COVID. People were curious about having some type of in-person thing again, and as we've evolved from that, it's like more in-person stuff, but as well as online, finding your niche communities and being a part of some type of community. I think it's going to be even bigger thing in 2023. And I'll leave it with that. Thank you, Andrew and Gale, for coming on our experimental episode of the show.
Woo!
Yeah. Have fun.